Hello, I'm Jacqueline Holstead, and you are listening to On Point Conversations. In this podcast series, we share creative marketing, content, and branding strategies that help your business successfully navigate the new normal marketing environment. In today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about decision making. Seems like a pretty easy topic, doesn't it? But very oftentimes we, and I know me as a business owner and as a business entrepreneur, gets to make lots of decisions and get decision fatigue and finally make decisions that maybe aren't the best at the time. So I'm going to talk to you today about some processes to put in place. We've all heard kind of that step-by-step process. There's the one that, consider the principles and values and objectives and then decide based on that and collect all the information, sleep on it, check the facts, define the problem, avoid biases, talk to mentors. I'm not trying to be flippant about those, but sometimes those are a little bit less than what we need. And that divergent thinking that we need in order to make decisions becomes harder. And there becomes this sort of situation called analysis by paralysis. You've probably been involved with that before, or going down the rabbit hole. Those are all just ways of saying getting off track and deciding to try something and look at something else and distracting yourself from the actual decision. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about decision making. I ran across a book. It's called Decisive, and it's 336 pages. It's by a dynamic duo. They're called Dan and Chip Heath, Heath. And it was very clear that decisions are about a lot more than simply saying yes or no to something. In fact, if you pick up this book, and what I'd like to do today basically is take some of those steps from there, add my own experience, and then hopefully you don't even have to buy the book. But if you look at what they say, and it's a very true statement, that if a decision isn't necessarily I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that, it might be you can make the decision to do this and that, and they work together. And while you could look at this book as far as, as I said, 336 pages of the art of making a decision, to avoid information overload, I'm going to be taking some very succinct skills and give you a little bit over a 1-minute summary of each of the 4 steps to mastering the art, along with some 4 lessons to carry with you so that you can make better decisions. The first point to think about is widen your options. So kind of as humans, we might sometimes have tunnel vision, and when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about me too, a tunnel vision. And while that can sometimes be very helpful in reaching our goals, it can work also in going against our decision-making world and our best decision-making. So decisions sometimes, when they're made quickly or when they're made based on something as a yes or a no, or we feel like we only have 1 or 2 options, then we use our past experience or our gut or different things to make those decisions. And sometimes that's not the best way to make the decision. It's better to say, I'm going to open up my options. Now, what I generally do in this is when I'm having to make a larger decision, you're not talking about the little day-to-day, but a larger decision for my business, I want to look at, either with myself or my team or my client, what are those other options that we can use? Widen those options out for making our decision so that we're not doing a this or that. We're doing everything that we can to make the best decision possible. So as the Decisive book recommends, lesson 1, decisions aren't binary. So because oftentimes we think, as I said before, of a decision as being either a yes or no, or it's this or it's that. But limiting ourselves in those possibilities limits our decision-making ability too. So decisions aren't necessarily binary. Whether you're making a decision, you should have at least, let's say, 3 options. You can have even more. And just really make that exhaustive list of all the choices that you really have in this given situation. What are all the options that you have to completing this decision? Now, in a way, it sounds like, boy, that would take me a lot of time. It's a lot less time than making the wrong decision and having to backtrack. There's no guarantee you're going to make the right decision, or they're not going to backtrack or need to do something else. But this is a way to help you make the best decision in that particular moment. Now, as I often say, we're not mind readers, we're not fortune tellers, and there are thought distortions that come in. So when we create this alternative universe, we want to lead to the best assumptions about what decision is going to be best, which decisions will and won't work, and everything in between. So look at how you initially looked at the decision for this particular problem or whatever it is, and how you maybe used your past experience and maybe you married some things with it that maybe didn't need to be there. So to avoid that, what we call narrow thinking, check those thoughts and check out whether you're relaying and then thinking about this in the past of something that didn't work in the past, but maybe this is really different and the timeline is different. So opening again up those options and really reality testing your assumptions. Are you making an assumption that for right now would be best put aside? Now you might really laugh at this one because I'm a real planner, but in this particular case, don't make plans. Rather than planning out each step of the decision-making process, remember to stay very flexible and see how it goes and experiment at every step in the process. One of the things I've been doing with one of my clients is promoting their podcast on different channels. And we started with some Facebook ads, which didn't work. By the way, their audience is in Facebook. We kind of knew that in the beginning, but we took a step in the water to see if that was a correct assumption or not. Now we're moving to Instagram. We're going to move over to Clubhouse. So we're adding things as we go. But as I'm working with them, I'm telling them rather than making this really step-by-step plan for them that I put together, it's best right now if we stay really flexible. And we're going to see how it goes. We're going to look at the results of what some of the decisions that we made as far as promoting this podcast. We're going to experiment, and we're going to go along that process kind of as a path, but not as something that's so set forward that we stumble on our own objectives, our own decision-making steps. So here, don't make too many solid plans. Look at this as a way to get into it and flexibly look at all the options, and then also maybe look at your decision you make now, and maybe in a week, 2, 3, it's something that you need to change because of the situation that's going on in the world or in your own company. One of the prime points that I always like is attain some distance before deciding. So just like sometimes absence makes the heart grow fonder, distance can make your decision more deliberate. So I oftentimes ask my clients when they're making a difficult decision or when we're making a decision that we theoretically or metaphorically maybe sleep on it. And often that happens because we might come back to it the next day. We might come back to it in a couple days. The thing is, sometimes you don't have that time frame, but sometimes you do have that time. And especially when it's a big decision for your company, taking a little bit of time to think about it and let it just kind of rest really does help the decision-making process. So I encourage my clients to just attain some distance before making any of those major decisions. The other lesson that's brought in this book, and I do tend to really agree with, is change your perspective. So when you're thinking about your decision and now you're gaining a little bit of distance and objectivity and you really care about the outcome, but put yourself kind of in a metaphorical shoes. Maybe you put it in the shoes of your customer if that's a decision you're making that's going to affect your customer. So put yourself in this decision-making process as if you were either a close friend, your future self, a mentor. Look at it from a distance because we can become emotionally tied to our businesses. We can also become emotionally tied to a certain decision because we think that's the right one. But take a step back and consider that literal distance. So you're going to take the literal distance of taking some time away from it, but also looking at it with really fresh eyes, particularly when this affects your coworkers and your customers, really looking at the eyes of the customer. What are they going to like? Many times we'll find that there's a certain app that I use, this is my experience, use a lot. And there will be an update. And the update, maybe because I'm not used to it, maybe because it doesn't fit my style, doesn't work for me. And therefore, I often think, did the person who did this update, or persons, or team, or company, think about the customer before they did it? Or did they simply say, this is what I would like, and they made it that way? And one person, you can still do surveys and things to find out from your bigger audience, but think about it in light of your customer. Also think of it in light if it's not based on your customer's needs, maybe in light of what you would do if you were a close friend, or what kind of mentoring you would do if this was your future self and you could look back on this decision. Oh my gosh, here's a good one. Prepare to be wrong. Because let's face it, nobody is going to be right all the time, and nobody likes to be wrong. But being willing to be wrong can help you make a decision and commit to it. And lesson number 4 is let your goal be to learn from every decision. So the goal of making a decision isn't necessarily to make the right decision. The goal of making the decision is to take action, because you need to take action. And unfortunately, that means you're going to be wrong some of the time. So you need to take that step still and be flexible, because if that isn't the right step to take, then you can step back. And there are likely going to be lots of pros and cons to a lot of your decisions. And there are likely to be lots of options and paths for your decisions. And so you might be picking one that you think at that particular moment is the right one, and whether the marketing environment changes or whether there is changes in your company, it might prove that down the line you have to say, oops, this is done. So right now what I'm going to do is just review the lessons that we talked about. We said that decisions aren't binary. They're not necessarily a yes or a no or a this or a that. They could be this and that, and it could be maybe yes and no. So we look at our options. Then we're going to not plan. We're going to, and that's actually, we're going to do some planning because we need to come up with steps, but we're not going to be planning that decision-making process so tightly that we can't make changes. So we're going to stay flexible. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to measure the decisions that we make, and we're going to look at it from a point of view that we want to learn. So the next one is change your perspective to your friend or future self or customer. So your perspective, even though you're very close to that decision, is now something that you think other people, whether it be your friend or future self or your customer, is giving you information or some advice on that particular decision, or what you in fact are going forward with. And then lesson number 4, let your goal be that you learn from every decision. It'll make making changes that don't work out easier, because you can learn from those, and you can learn from the past, and you can learn as you're moving along. So remember to remain flexible. Look at it as this is a way to learn. Prepare, unfortunately, to be wrong some of the time, and prepare to be able to move back if you need to, or move in different directions as you maneuver your path through the right kinds of decisions for your particular company. That's my podcast for today. If you want to send me questions, which I love to get, you can reach me at onpointthinking.com. That's my website. I have a contact page. And I will be answering your questions from there. Again, that's onpointthinking.com. Thanks, and have a great day. Thank you for listening, and I invite you to join me next week as we talk more about specific actions you can take to reach your own business goals. You can find my library of other inspiring podcasts like this one at onpointthinking.com. Again, thank you for listening. This is Jacqueline Holstead at On Point Conversations.